At last, the long era of unemployment came to an end. It happened as suddenly as it began. Once more, the factory chimneys belched their black fumes over the town. The deep holes in the wine slag tips became covered with weeds and grass, or showed in to give no clue that an army of tatterdemalions had once invaded the bleak slopes. The street corners and the parks were deserted. In the hours before dawn, the clip-clop of the tin workers' clogs was heard again. Prosperity had returned to Abermawr. Such prosperity that only came to the workers in a weekly wage packet on Friday afternoons. One evening in May, Dick, desperate in his desire for peace and solitude and distracted from his attempt to settle down to the evening paper, shuffled up the passageway and into the front room. He was nervy and irritable. Millie's constant tirades were getting him down. He wanted seclusion, quiet. In the parlour, he found Yayan writing. This annoyed him, for the boy's absorption in his studies had inflamed the mother's temper again. "Listen to me, Yayan," he began. "Why don't you fling those books of yours away for a while? God, this house is fair driving me daft. What with your mother rampaging and you with your head buried in the books all the time, this is a fine place to come home to after a day's work." Sometimes, Yayan's pity for his dad changed to bitter scornfulness. The way he gave in to Mam, always seeking to pacify her, caring nothing for anyone else's discomfort but his own. Why torment himself with such thoughts? Dad wanted him to go out. Okay, he would go out, to the streets, or the fair, anywhere. The fairground was thronged with people, pushing, jostling, swaying. Crowds of careless, high-spirited boys and girls screamed and giggled, their shrill voices echoing above the pulsating dynamos, the blare of roundabouts, high above the sharp crack of bullets at the miniature rifle ranges and the stentorian cries of the sideshow barkers. Yayan shouldered his way along the crowded avenues, swings up and down into the darkness and back again into the light. Screaming girls, skirts pulled tightly over knees, a glimpse of a satin underskirt and a blush hidden in the dark. Fortune-telling, slot machines, see your future husband, the man of your dreams, an isolated canvas booth, your fortune revealed, the original Gypsy Lee, the fat lady, the thin man, the wild man from Borneo, cow with 6 legs, lady with 2 heads, the smallest elephant in captivity, the tattooed lady, the hairy man. Nearby, a housey store with its circle of prospective clients. The attendant caught Yayan's eye. "You over there! Come on, young fellow, be a sport. Have a go, last ticket, the very last one." Yayan took the ticket. "Good for you, young sport. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're all set to go. Choose any number you like on the board and throw your darts. All ready now, go." Yayan scanned the small, numbered board in his hand. He leaned over the encircling rail and took aim with his dart. Suddenly, he was conscious of someone staring at him. He threw his dart and missed the number he had chosen. Once again, he became self-conscious, uneasy. He looked across the stall. On the opposite side, her hands resting on the wooden rail, stood a young girl, neatly dressed in a light blue costume and white silk blouse. Her dark hair gathered into a pale blue ribbon. She averted her gaze as Yayan looked at her. 6-17-32, the attendant's voice called. The players watched their boards. "Housey, I've got it!" A young flapper waved her board and giggled with delight. Yayan glanced across the stall. The girl's eyes were on him again. He straightened his tie and coughed nervously. Then he saw her smile. He looked over his shoulder. Her smile widened. He returned it bashfully. "Good evening." He touched his cap. The girl smiled shyly and moved away from the rail. He caught her lightly by the arm. "May I see you home?" he asked, his confidence wavering. She looked into his face. She gave a nervous little laugh. I don't know really, but there's no harm in that. I mean, I'm just seeing you home. No, I suppose not. They crossed the road over a small footbridge. Yayan held her arm lightly. He helped her over the curbside and let her walk on the inside of the pavement. As they came into the bright light of the high street, he saw that, in spite of her neat appearance, her clothes were cheap. Her costume was well worn, the cloth at the wrists threadbare. Now he had a better opportunity to judge her. As she turned her face to speak to him, he was startled by the pallor of her complexion. She was very beautiful. Her eyes were large and expressive, yet there was a lack of lustre in them, as though she were tired or strained. Yayan drew up in the shadow of a doorstep. Shall we stay here a minute? I don't mind, but I mustn't be late. There's something I'd like to say to you before we go. Yes? Yayan toyed with a button on his coat. You don't think I'm a masher? He asked suddenly. I mean, I didn't try to click with you at the fair. She laughed. Of course not. I know you're not like the monkey parade crowd. Why, you haven't even asked me my name yet. Your name? Gee, of course I haven't. Well, Sally, she said. My name's Sally Marvin. Marvin? You're not Welsh. Well, yes and no. Mum's Welsh, she was born here, but Dad comes from Devon. Oh, I thought it was an odd name. My name's Morgan, she said. Yayan Morgan. Yayan looked at her with surprise. You know my name. Sally, there will be another time, will there? I mean, you will let me see you again. If you want to, Yayan. You'd be my girl. Yes, if you like me enough. I think you're a very nice girl. I'd be glad to go walking with you. Glad and happy too. All right then, Yayan. I'll see you some other time. When? Sunday night? Gee. To meet you. Where will I meet you? Yayan pondered, too excited to think clearly. What about Howard's Park? 7 o'clock. Is that too early? I mean, do you go to church or chapel? Not next Sunday, she said softly. Yayan's meeting with Sally had given him new hope. He began to find joy where before he knew only bitterness and grief. At home, his mother noted with some satisfaction that his absorption in his studies had suddenly ceased. For 4 nights now, he hadn't been near the front parlour. She commented to her husband on the Saturday night after Yayan's introduction to Sally. Something funny must have happened to our Yayan lately, Dick. He's a lot brighter. Listen to him laughing up there now with Phyllis and Gwynaira. Can't make it out at all. Do you think he's settling down at the foundry at last? Tell you the truth, Millie, I wouldn't be surprised to hear that he's made a hit with some little girl at the fairground. Yayan's a good-looking lad, carries himself well, and he's got brains too, Mrs. Morgan winced. That's fine talk coming from you, Dick Morgan. Girls indeed. Yayan waited anxiously at the gate. The town hall clock chimed the hour. 7 o'clock. Would Sally come? He looked down the hill. There was no sign of her. Hello, Yayan. He turned quickly around, gladdened by the sound of her voice. Sally, I thought you'd forgotten. A promise is a promise, she reminded him. She smiled, and his heart lifted. I'm so glad you turned up, he said. And you're right on time, too. He returned her smile. Shall we go round the park? He suggested. All right, Yayan, I'd love to. It's a lovely night for a walk. He took her arm in his. They walked slowly side by side through the gateway. They found a secluded corner and sat down. The air was pungent with the smell of earth and the early spring flowers. The white blossom of cherry trees glistened in the sun. Nearby, the pollen from a yew tree hung like a transparent blue cloud in the air. Sally was silent for a while. "Penny for your thoughts," Yayan pressed her gently. She laughed. "They're worth more than that, Yayan." "Then tell me, and I'll give you tuppence." She brushed a blade of grass from her lap. "I was thinking, what a waste of schooling it was to put a clever boy like you into a job where there's no chance of getting on. What made your mother do such a thing?" "Oh, there's plenty of chances to get on in the foundry, Sally. I can become a charge hand or a foreman," he teased. "I don't mean that, Yayan. It's just so wrong to have had a good education and then to throw it away." "But I'm not throwing it away, Sally. I tell you, I'll be out of the foundry before this year's gone. That is, if I'm lucky." They stood outside the gate. He felt reluctant to leave her. "It's a bit too early to go home. What do you say, Sally?" he ventured. "Would you like to go somewhere else? That is, if you feel all right." "I don't mind, Yayan, but I must be in by 10. "Then what about—" he hesitated. "Listen, Sally, would you care to go round Lover's Lane for a walk? We shan't stay there," he added quickly. All right, but remember, I mustn't be late." The first turning on the right, 100 yards up the main road, took them into Lover's Lane, a narrow path flanked by tall hedges that wound for a mile or so into the countryside. He put his arms around her. He wanted to protect her. She was his girl, his first girl, and nothing else in the world mattered. And he would protect her and fight for her. He would be to her as Sir Lancelot was to Elaine, Sir Geraint to his Enid, as all the chivalrous knights of Arthur's court. He embraced her with all his strength. He pressed her backwards against the gate. He felt her trembling under him. "Yayan," she breathed, "Yayan." A couple passed by. He heard a familiar voice, but he did not try to recall where he had heard it before. His thoughts were of Sally alone. He whispered her name, joyfully, and then fiercely. And then with a sudden slamming of a gate in the distance came an awareness, a realization of what they had done. She drew herself away. "Oh, Yayan, please, we mustn't." She began to weep. He stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to do or say. "Sally," she looked at him through her tears. "I'm sorry, Yayan," she sobbed, choking with emotion. "I didn't know what I was doing. This has never happened to me before." It's all right, Sally," he whispered. He took her arm. "I'm the one that's to blame, and I'm sorry. I'm terribly sorry." He gripped her arm tightly. "Sally, there will be another time. I mean, you promised to see me again?" The anxiety in his tone was apparent to her. She clasped his hand. "Yayan." "Yes, Sally?" he asked, breathless. "I'm very fond of you," she said softly. A sinking feeling came over him. "Fond of me? Is that all?" She lowered her eyes. He sensed her confusion. "Well, Yes, Sally, go on, say it." "I love you, Yayan." "Oh, Sally." He kissed her fondly. She nestled once more in his arms, and they stood there in silence. "Where have you been, Yayan?" His father was half undressed and ready for bed when he entered the kitchen. He appeared anxious and worn. "A fine time we've had here, wondering what had become of you. Do you know what time it is? Nearly 12. "I'm sorry, Dad." The door in the passageway opened and his mother appeared, clad in a nightdress, a shawl over her shoulders. She frowned at him. "I heard you come in," she said sharply. "A fine time for a young boy to be out, and on a Sunday night too. What the neighbours will think, I don't know." If you don't want to listen, Bull said, maybe the chaps in the foundry would like to have a earful. Oh, no, don't. Yayan caught him by the wrist. What have you got to say about Sally? Bull grinned. That's the name I heard the chappie call her, and was she hot. You ought to have been there, Tommy. Why is she, you bloody swine? Yayan aimed wildly at Bull's face. Bull staggered backwards, his hand clasped over his injured eye. He stumbled against an iron core box and hurt his thigh. Abraham tried to stop the fight. Yayan pushed him forcibly aside and threw himself again at Bull. He was insane with fury. He swung back his arm and hit him with all his strength in the other eye. Yayan knew no mercy. Abraham slid open the stove door. A fine howdy-do, he mumbled. A fight first thing in the morning. Haven't I got enough to worry about already without this quarrelling and fighting? That Bull Jackson deserves a packet. He's asked for it plenty, and now he's had it. He beckoned the crowd to move away. He looked at Yayan. Better go wash your hands. I'm going home. Well, and what is it all about? His mother demanded as they reached the kitchen. Yayan sat down near the fireplace. He nursed his swollen hands. I had a fight with Bull Jackson. And over what, may I ask? Nothing, ma'am, nothing that would interest you. She waited a moment, put the kettle on the stove. You weren't fighting over some girl, were you? Who is she? I asked you who she is. What's her name? Where's she from? Marvin. Sally Marvin. That's her name. She lives in Crooked Row, but she's a good girl, ma'am. If she lives in Crooked Row, that's enough for me, she challenged. A fine place to live in, full of drunken sods, children running all over the place like as if they were rabbits. What decent family lives there? Tell me. Why, there's not a house that has a decent bit of furniture in it. Too poor to buy even a piano. Yayan held her arms. Ma'am, listen to me. I don't want to speak like this to you, but you are wrong. Wrong about everything. If you want me to go back to the foundry today, I will go. But please don't say any more about Sally. I like her, ma'am. She's a lovely girl. Sally's name was not mentioned in the house again, not in his hearing. Sally and Yayan walked up the path until they came to an open glade. It was a clear, bright day, a day when the sky seemed so close to the earth that Yayan felt he could reach up and touch it with his fingertips. The air was fresh and sweet. Nearby, a small stream trickled musically into a brown pool. Pink stone islands from which green reeds sprouted peered over the water. Shall we sit here, Yayan? Sally took the basket and sat down to prepare the picnic. Yayan lay on his back and shaded his eyes from the strong rays of sunshine that pierced the treetops. He listened to the stream as it sang on its way to the pool. He was happy. Happy as the sun glittering on the waters of the stream like the laughter of a child. Then Sally spoke. Yayan, I'm worried over you. He raised his head and laughed. Worried? Go on with you. He pushed her playfully. Get the dinner ready, girl. I'm as hungry as a wolf. I'm serious, Yayan. And somebody ought to tell you. Tell me what, girl? He caught her hand. Sally, he said, you are like Olwen. He pressed a finger to her lips. Do you want to know more about her? No, she answered, brushing his finger away. I want to speak to you. She was the fairest lady in the Mabinogion. He went on, closed his eyes and lay back on the grass. The maiden was clothed in a robe of flame-coloured silk, and about her neck was a collar of ruddy gold, on which were precious emeralds and rubies. More yellow was her head than the flower of the broom, and her skin was whiter than the foam of the wave, and fairer were her hands and fingers than the blossoms of the wood anemone amidst the spray of the meadow fountain. The eye of the trained hawk, the glance of the three-mewed falcon was not brighter than hers. Her bosom was more snowy than the breast of the white swan, her cheek was redder than the reddest roses. Whoso beheld her was filled with her love. 4 white trefoils sprung up wherever she trod, and therefore was she called Olwen. Her kiss prevented him from saying any more. The long walk home along the country lane was exhausting, and as they came to the outskirts of the town, Sally suddenly drew up at the roadside. She began to cough. A violent retching seized her, and she grew pale and distraught. "Oh, Ieuan," she cried, clutching his arm in fear. He looked at her wildly. Sally, what's wrong?" She leaned back against the hedge. "I'm ill, Ieuan. I feel faint." He stroked her forehead. It felt cold and clammy. Beads of perspiration glistened on her cheeks and temples. "I'll get you a glass of water," he said urgently. He ran to a nearby house and hammered on the door. The woman of the house answered him, and she came presently with a glass of water. "Come into the house for a while, my girl," she said kindly, "and have a little rest." She took Sally's arm. "Perhaps it would be best to send for a doctor," she suggested. No, thanks," Sally said. She smiled feebly. "I'm all right now. Indeed I am, thank you." "Are you sure, my girl?" "Yes, quite sure. I think it would be better if I went home." Ieuan, torn with anxiety, helped her along the road a little way. A passing bus stopped to his signal, and they boarded it together. "Sally," he breathed as they rode homewards, "you must see the doctor. You've got to. Do you understand?" She nodded. "All right, Ieuan, I'll go." "Good." He squeezed her hand affectionately. "And to make sure, I'll come with you tonight."